I'm Larry Jacobs, a professor here at the Humphrey Institute and University of Minnesota. I want to welcome you to the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs. This is the Public Affairs School of the University of Minnesota. About 3 or 4 election cycles ago, we stood back and we were having conversations with our friends and partners in the community, and they said, it'd be really helpful if we had opportunities to hear from the candidates, pose questions outside of the necessary process of the debate and the kind of, the ads that have got some elbows in them, to really have a chance to hear a full idea rather than those 5-second sound bites. And so we started a series of Meet the Candidates. We've been doing this, as I said, for statewide offices. We don't always get everybody, and we frankly don't have the resources to bring everybody in, or every race, but we do the gubernatorial races and have been doing them. And we're delighted to have you here. A couple quick announcements. Because this session is being recorded and will be rebroadcast, we ask that you silence your cell phones. We are a tweet-friendly environment here, so I know people will keep them on and might be tweeting or something else I don't know about, but please silence them. It is not enjoyable for anyone to try to follow a comment and have all of a sudden the cell phone go off. It's embarrassing to you, and it's obviously irritating to everyone around you. Okay, we had Mark Dayton in on Monday at noon. Had a very interesting conversation. We're having Tom Horner come in on this coming Monday at noon. We welcome you to come to that. And we're delighted to have Representative Tom Emmer. I met Tom Emmer a couple contexts, but we really got to know each other when he spent quite a bit of time with us, holed up in one of the back rooms here, talking about election administration and how we could improve things after the 2000 recount in the Senate race and some of the problems that came out. And I really became someone who really respected him as a serious, smart person. And then he went on and won the Republican Party's endorsement and now nomination. So it's a real pleasure and honor to have Tom Emmer with us. As you can see from his bio information, which you have in front of you, he received his BA in political science, which immediately tells you good things, from the University of Alaska Fairbanks in 1984. He then received his law degree from William Mitchell College of Law in 1988. He was elected to the Minnesota House of Representatives in 2004. Please give a warm welcome to Representative Tom Emmer.
Thank you, Larry, Professor. Thank you for having me here today. Thank you to the Humphrey Institute for doing this. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you today and to share with you some things. I was told that we're inviting you to speak about an issue that you're passionate about. Now, during my brief time in the Minnesota legislature, and more recently while I have campaigned for the governor's office of the state of Minnesota, if you're familiar with me, you've probably heard me go on at length about the need for a new direction in this state. You have no doubt heard me say time and time again, it's time to bring our state government into the 21st century. It is time to redesign government from the bottom up. We must evaluate and eliminate redundancies, bloat, and wasteful spending in our state government. We must redesign government to deliver the services people expect in an efficient, affordable, and sustainable manner. And we must create a business-friendly environment by reducing taxes and reforming our regulatory system to allow our existing businesses the opportunity to start hiring new workers and to make Minnesota attractive to new investment that will grow more jobs. Yes, if you've heard me once, you've heard me many times deliver this message. And I'm very passionate about the need to redesign government and grow jobs in Minnesota. But you might be surprised when I tell you those are not the issues I want to talk about today. In fact, there is another issue that I feel equally, if not more, passionate about, and that's education. My passion for education does not arise just because, as the father of 7 and a state legislator, I have seen our education system and the challenges firsthand. No, my passion for this issue comes from this simple truth. We can redesign government to be more efficient than ever, and we can create the business environment that will create more jobs than we could ever dream. But if we do not have the next generation prepared to drive the economic engine, our efforts will have been for naught. We have a lot to be proud of with our history and success in education, and we have good successes to build on. But we cannot and we must not refuse to acknowledge our weaknesses or accept our challenge, bless you, or accept our challenge to reform and improve. Now is the time of opportunity. We must not miss the great chance that we have. There are 850,000 students in our public education system. We have a responsibility to make sure that they have even better opportunities for success than you and I. That is what parents do, and that is what we do together as a community. Minnesotans, again, have a lot to be proud of. For over a century, Minnesotans have scrimped, saved, and made sacrifices to ensure that our children would get a world-class, a first-class, world-class education. And for the most part, we have succeeded. Education has been the secret to our economic success. Believe it or not, it's not our great weather that has made Minnesota an economic powerhouse. It is our outstanding workforce. Minnesotans are smart, motivated, and they deliver results. So we need to think seriously about reform and improvement. The fact of the matter is, we are not just competing any longer against Wisconsin, Iowa, North and South Dakota. We are competing with the world, and right now our kids fall in the middle of the pack despite greater financial investments, and we can and must do better. We need to ensure that our kids get a world-class education and that they are ready to join that world-class workforce. Minnesota cannot afford to stand still any longer while others continue to surpass us. We need to, and this may surprise you as I quote from President Obama, race to the top. Our parents know this, our business leaders know this, our academic leaders know this, our elected officials know this, and our economic competitors know this. As we like to say, it's not exactly rocket science, except this time it is about rocket science and our ability to do it better than our friends across state and national borders. Take a look at the Minnesota economy. There is literally no aspect of the Minnesota economy that is not dependent upon having the highest quality workforce in the world. Minnesota is not and should not aspire to be the cheapest place to do business in the world. So we have to be the highest value, and that means the most productive. And high productivity is more a function of human capital than physical capital. Almost every industry is touched by technology. Medical devices and software development, obviously. But also agriculture, shipping, manufacturing, and even retail are now technology-driven. Go out to greater Minnesota, and you hear as much about broadband availability as you do about crop yields. Almost 1/3 of new job growth in the next 10 years will be in math and science-related fields. Unfortunately, there will be no new job growth if we do not produce highly skilled workers to fill those jobs. Unless we continue to excel, employers will locate elsewhere, whether it is in this country or abroad. Our education model is mostly stuck in the 1950s and 60s, when about 1/4 of our students went to college. Today, all of our students require college or some post-secondary training. High school graduates need to be ready for that training. In the next few years, we need to make 50 years progress in reform. We need a 21st century education model for a 21st century economy. Some of my friends across the aisle still point to the Minnesota Miracle as the model for educational progress. I think that shows how badly skewed our thinking is on education. The Minnesota Miracle of 1971 was not about improving the way we educate our kids. It wasn't even about improving the performance of students. The Minnesota Miracle refers to changing how we paid for education, the shift to more state funding and away from property taxes. In my mind, that's a pretty minor miracle. How we pay for education is not nearly as important as what kind of education our kids get from those dollars. Changing how we pay for education, or even how much we are willing to pay, is not a miracle. It's an accounting change. And the challenge we face today is not about accounting or dollars spent. It's about the challenge to fundamentally change how we teach our kids to succeed in the modern world. That's why I want to share with you my vision for reforming education in Minnesota. I'm not going to promise you a miracle, even a minor miracle. Instead, I want to outline a vision for how to move Minnesota back on top, not just in the United States, but also internationally. We have one goal in our reform plan: improving educational outcomes for our students. How will we achieve that goal? Well, there is no one way, but we have to start somewhere. And our starting point is measuring outcomes, reporting the outcomes to the public, and rewarding improvement and success. Measure, report, and reward. That is the first step in reform. You have to begin with high academic standards, the goals you want your students to meet or exceed in order to graduate into the workforce. We need high standards in math, in science, in reading, and in language arts. Those standards have to be crafted to push Minnesota to the top of national and international achievement. That will mean getting students ready for college, getting a job, and becoming a member of the most productive workforce in the world. Not every job requires a college degree, but just about every job in the new economy will require workers who are able to think critically and act intelligently and who have received post-secondary training. Our employers are telling me a lot of high school graduates can't do these things, certainly not well enough today, and that has to change. First, we set our academic standards with the highest bar of achievement possible. Next, we have to measure academic progress against those standards. Now, I know there is quite a bit of controversy about the role of testing in schools. Testing is not a perfect tool for creating or measuring progress. But with all of its flaws, testing is the best and only way we have to measure student progress. What it has been said, what gets measured will get done. In order to improve outcomes for our students, we need to measure how well we are doing in meeting the high academic standards we set. And that means we have to use tests. What gets measured will get done. Minnesota has the MCAs, the Minnesota Comprehensive Assessment. There is also the National Assessment for Educational Progress. While these tests are important, we can deliver higher quality tests that measure results and give teachers information they need throughout the school year and in a timely manner. A strong testing program should provide a baseline from which we can measure improvement. Set high standards and then measure achievement. Once we measure student achievement, it is important that we report the results. And I don't mean just to the state and federal governments, so we can pore over the statistics. I mean report those results to parents, to students, to employers, and to the world in an understandable manner. We need to know how our students are doing, whether they are improving and whether they're not. We need to know which schools and which teachers are doing a good job and which ones need improvement. We need to give school leaders the opportunity to correct deficiencies, and we need to give parents and students the option of moving from a classroom or a school that is not doing a good enough job to one that is. That means not just grading students. That means grading schools and giving parents the opportunity to take their kids out of underperforming schools and move them to where they can get the education they deserve. That's called accountability. And we need more of it in our education system. Of course, accountability works both ways. We tend to think of it in terms of consequences for not living up to standards, but it should mean more than that. For too long, we have treated our teachers who excel the same as those who do not. Sure, we might give out a Teacher of the Year award, a plaque, and a pat on the back, but we don't do in our schools what we routinely do in every other walk of life: reward performance by those who excel. We have to change that. We must change that. We need to institute real performance pay for our teachers so that the rewards of being great and doing great things for our students are not just an internal sense of a job well done. The rewards should be real, tangible, and yes, unequal. The best should get paid the best. That way everybody tries to be the best. And we need the best teachers in the world for our kids. So let's start treating our teachers as the professionals that they are. Measure, report, reward. That is where we need to start if we want to truly improve our students' academic performance and achievement. Inject accountability and reward high achievers. Of course, we need to do more than create the framework for improving our education system. We need to respond to problems which we already know exist in today's education system. So what else can we do? Well, the first step we need to take is to ensure that we have effective teachers in every classroom. We know that teacher effectiveness matters. As I outlined earlier, I envision a system that rewards the most effective teachers. But rewarding great teachers is not enough. We need to ensure that every teacher in every classroom is effective. Academic studies confirm what we already know through common sense. Not every teacher is effective, and ineffective teachers harm student performance a lot. If we want our students to achieve, and we do, then we have to tackle the problem of teacher ineffectiveness. And here's how we are going to do that. First, alternative pathways to licensure. We need to open the doors of our classrooms to well-qualified adults who have not taken the traditional steps to become teachers. It just does not make sense that a chemist from 3M can teach a class at the university, but not in our high schools. We need to encourage the best and the brightest from all walks of life to share their experience with students in our classrooms. Next, we need to change the way we deal with tenure in our public schools. Rather than have a union tenure system that virtually ensures a job for life, we need to evaluate teachers annually, and we need to reevaluate tenure once every 5 years to ensure their continued effectiveness. Good teachers have nothing to fear from this change. There will always be a place in our schools for effective, experienced teachers. Next, we have to address evaluation, the way we evaluate student performance. We evaluate student performance over the school year, and we must evaluate teachers based upon how much progress their students are making during that school year. We know that teacher effectiveness matters, so let's measure that effectiveness and let's improve on it. We also must address ineffective teachers. If a teacher is found to be ineffective and remains that way for 3 consecutive years, it's time to counsel that teacher into a career change. If a teacher cannot help his or her students make appropriate progress, then we need to find a teacher who can. We must also revamp the teacher education system to require higher standards for enrollment, residency programs, and partnerships with school districts. We need to hold our education system that is producing teachers responsible for graduating teachers who are prepared to be effective in the classroom. If we are going to hold our teachers accountable, let's do the same for those who teach our teachers. Finally, we must have more rigorous teacher competency exams for licensure. And we must withhold limited licenses from those who cannot pass the tests. Ensuring that teachers in the classroom are effective is vital to our kids' success. Absolutely. But another piece of the puzzle has to be freeing effective teachers and schools to exercise their best judgment about how to achieve the goals we are setting. Teachers and principals are professionals. We must never forget that. And there is nothing wrong with making sure that they are doing a good job, but once we have ensured competency, we need to allow these professionals, our teachers and principals, to act as the professionals that they are. The state has placed too many burdensome mandates on our local educators, and we need to free them from mandates that interfere with our kids' education. Now, I'm not proposing eliminating all state mandates, but what I am suggesting is allowing school districts to petition the state for exemptions from mandates of their choice. As we reform our schools, we need to empower educators to do their job without onerous prescriptive orders from above. Schools with the toughest jobs, educating a large population of students struggling to navigate the social and academic challenges of our school system, need the most empowerment to take assertive steps to close the achievement gap. That's why we need to create urban school district empowerment zones. In exchange for developing a real plan to address the achievement gap, we should give our urban school districts the power to do what they need to do to achieve their goals. I'm proposing that we exempt these empowerment zones from a greater number of state and local mandates, including collective bargaining provisions that interfere with the ability of schools and teachers to improve student achievement. For example, many school districts have teacher transfer rules today that allow teachers to select where they want to teach. That sounds great, but what happens is our schools with the highest needs get the least experienced teachers. And then we wonder why we cannot close our achievement gap. Instead, we should empower school boards to make sure all of our schools have effective teachers. Let's give these school leaders the power they need to close the achievement gap. All of these reforms depend upon our kids being ready to learn when they reach our K-12 education system, and frankly, too many today are not. That's why I'm also proposing that we do what we can to help get those kids ready for kindergarten. The best way to do this, I believe, is for the state to provide scholarships for children to attend approved public or private preschools. In order to qualify for these programs, these preschool programs need to be measured for effectiveness in the way that we will measure our K-12 schools. They can't just be places that babysit our kids. Literacy should be the goal, and we should be ensuring that our kids are on a path to being fully literate students and citizens. Well-designed preschool programs work, and we cannot afford not to prepare our most at-risk children to succeed in school and beyond. Even with all that we do to improve our public education system, it is important to recognize that children come in many shapes, sizes, colors, and dispositions. One size does not fit all, and that means making sure that students and parents have as many choices as possible to find the right fit for their educational needs. Parents should be allowed to select the public school of their choice. We need strong charter school options, and we need to do everything we can do to replicate the charter school models which have been shown to work. We also need to tap into the new world of technology by enhancing our budding virtual online education curricula. These schools, online schools, allow students to move at their own pace, enabling faster and slower learners to reach high standards at a pace that meets their particular needs. I am honestly excited about the new opportunities that this will allow us in terms of customizing education both inside traditional classrooms and beyond. In the future, customized education will have to become the norm rather than the exception. I am convinced that we are too wedded to the traditional model of education. We need to encourage innovation, including going beyond the bounds of what we do today. Online learning is a good first step as an alternative, but it is only a first step in the right direction. We need to liberate innovators to experiment with different models that could radically improve upon what we have today. I'm not talking about abandoning the model that we have today, but of encouraging innovation and how we educate our kids. Remember, we started in a one-room schoolhouse and we have advanced to where we are today. It's time to start talking about how we advanced education beyond where we're at today. That will mean moving away from the traditional command and control model of education, giving real authority to educators in return for giving them the responsibility for achieving genuine results. Charter schools need to move in this direction as well. Online learning, again, is another step in the right direction. We need to encourage more innovations like these. That will mean decreasing our top-down command and control model. Let's set ambitious goals and give more freedom to educators to achieve those goals in innovative ways. Businesses that work this way have been wildly successful. Google is a great example. Let's look at ways to liberate our teachers and students. Let's give them the freedom to succeed. Change can't and won't come quickly, but it must. Tweaking the current model can only get us so far. Let's harness the curiosity and the creative energy that hides inside every one of our children and create opportunities for these children to learn in more ways than just the traditional classroom. The best way to get from where we are today to where we need to be is to give our professional educators the opportunity to be the innovators that many of them already want to be. Politicians and bureaucrats are not the best people to direct the innovation we need. Let's harness the creative energy of educators and give them the freedom and resources they need to change the current paradigm of education. I don't know exactly what that will look like, and frankly, neither do any of you. Who envisioned the iPhone 20 years ago or personal computers as they are today 30 years ago? The future I envision is one that includes reforming and improving the system we have today, and a parallel realm of innovative options that parents and students can choose to participate in. Let's see what injecting some real creativity into the system can bring us. As you can see, I do have ambitious goals for improving our education system. This new era of fiscal restraint must not mean giving up on improving education. In fact, it gives us the mandate to look anew at real reforms and real changes to what we have been doing for the last half century. We need to seize the opportunity that's before us. Fiscal restraint will not mean being reconciled to just maintaining what we have today. It will be a spur to fundamentally reevaluate the system and open the door to alternative ways to improve performance. Improving public education is not an abstract public policy issue for me. Jackie and I have 7 kids. Our family has depended upon the public schools, as do most Minnesota families. If we want their future to be brighter than ours, and I know we do, then the time to act is now. As governor, I am committed to real change and real improvement for my kids and for all of Minnesota's children. Minnesota has been and remains the best place in the world to live, work, and raise a family. With these education reforms, I believe we can ensure that it remains that way for decades to come. Thank you again so much for having me. I look forward to having the discussion.
Reminder, please fill out your question cards. We're going to get to as many as we can. There'll be people walking around to pick them up. Representative Emmer, thank you very much. That was, as you said at the outset, a vision. And it really is a bold vision. And I'm struck by maybe some of the overlap between what you're talking about and what the Obama administration's been talking about. And I'm wondering if you see that as well.
That I'm struck by it as well? Sure I am. But I mean, I've been talking about this since the beginning. You know, you serve on a city council like I did for several years. You don't declare your political persuasion, Larry. You don't do that. You make your decisions based on a set of principles, and then you are prepared to answer for those. It should be no different when we're in this position. Some of the things that the Obama administration has put forward, we absolutely agree with. And by the way, many in the legislature, in the Minnesota legislature, on both sides of the aisle agree with many of these reforms. It's time, though, because I think people sometimes don't step up to take the criticism for standing up for them. I have no problem in saying kudos to you, President Obama, for promoting these. We know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. Now let's all work together and start to get them going.
That's a very hopeful message. Thank you. Let me ask a question, though, about how we've been moving on education reform. You go back 20 or 30 years, Minnesota was a place to come to. We were the ones who created choice within the public schools. We created the charter schools. Minnesota was the innovator that other states studied. And it seems like we've gotten bogged down. Governor Pawlenty had a number of different ideas about performance and rewarding performance and other areas, and it just seems to have bogged down. You've got a very ambitious agenda here, including raising questions about tenure and what to do about teachers who aren't effective in the classroom. How do you see moving forward and building the support that you will need to get this through the legislature.
Well, and sorry, you know that what I do all the time is reframe when you ask me questions like that. And what you did with that one, and I say this respectfully, is you referenced dealing with ineffective teachers. I hope it wasn't lost on people here today that the majority of what I was talking about were effective teachers and how we reward success. Because let's face it, we've got a few number of ineffective teachers. The problem I think that a lot of our educating professionals have is sometimes their hands are tied as to what they're allowed to do and what they can do, which is why it's not only about measuring effectiveness, it's about rewarding results, and then it's about freeing them up to do the things that they believe they need to do. Larry, it's the 1,000-pound gorilla in the room. It has to do with the union leadership. It doesn't have to do with the great union members, the teachers that we have in our classrooms. For whatever reason, the union leader in the state of Minnesota has been adamantly opposed to these reforms, primarily the alternative teacher licensure, the performance pay issues, the measurement ideas. He's been opposed to that. And because of that, in the last legislative session, even though we have colleagues, Democrats, Republicans alike, really supported a lot of these ideas, they never got a vote on the House floor. So I think twofold. One, you got to be able to stand up and respectfully say, I disagree with you, and this is the problem. One person cannot control, or one leadership group cannot control education reform and the status, our kids' future in the state of Minnesota. We've got to start talking about, as a group, get past that, and how do we address these issues. Teacher tenure, by the way, everybody else in this state, in this country, is typically, tenure is not the way it's done. It's done based on production. If you're successful, you get rewarded. You not only get rewarded with more compensation, a better compensation package, because you're valuable, but you get rewarded by being invited back. And tenure, it takes away some of those incentives. We're not talking about eliminating it totally, which I think might be a little different. We're talking about just having some evaluation measures in it. And again, our good teachers, they should celebrate this, because it's another way for them to show that they're doing the job, they're effective.
So if I could just summarize at least part of what you said. Message from Tom Emmer to unions, new sheriff in town.
Wow. Here's the thing. If we do that, then everybody digs their heels in, and they take immediately an adversarial approach. Rather than saying there's a new sheriff in town, or, it's this, I think that's the wrong way to go at it. I think it's better off identifying, the guy who said we're not going to allow people to have a vote on this. It's not about you and what you want. I know you got a job to represent your members, but I got a job, just like other people in this room, to represent all the people of the state of Minnesota. And in this case, we're talking about, I think, a very fair approach and balance that, this is important. Republicans and Democrats have voted for these things that I'm talking about. This is not an us and you. This is a we proposal. And rather than get into that, let's go pick a fight out on the school playground, let's not do that. Let's say that, look, for whatever reason, that was then, this is now. Let's start talking about how we can create an opportunity for everybody to have a win-win and success.
Thank you, Representative Emmer. Let me ask you a couple questions about how you think about requirements and testing. At one point towards the end, you talked about the importance of rigorous evaluation. You've also in favor of alternative paths to licensure. Are those moving in the same direction? That is, if you have an alternative path to licensure, will it still be a rigorous evaluation?
Well, it should be, but I guess we'll leave that to the discussion, the details of it, because the teachers that I've talked to, and there's difference of opinion, no question. I think the ones that are a little reluctant, they're worried about creating situations where they can't succeed. That's not the goal. The goal is to allow teachers to be able to show that they're effective. It's not to create a system where we somehow keep them from succeeding so we can keep from paying good ones what they should get paid. The alternative teacher licensure thing, I would suggest, goes more to the shortage that we really have. in this state. We've got a shortage. We've got so many teachers that are laid off right now. We got great teachers out there that are looking for work, but the thing that we do have a major shortage of are qualified, experienced math and science teachers. And I'm looking at trying to fill the need as much as anything else, and that's where that comes in, which is why I use the example of the chemist from 3M.
When President Bush ran for president back in 2000, he referred to himself as a compassionate conservative, and one of the leading parts of that was his No Child Left Behind reform. Obviously, there's been a lot of controversy about it. And, you know, a lot of it was partisan, of course, but there were some conservatives, perhaps a large number of conservatives, who had real problems with the mandates from the federal government. Charles Murray is one of the conservatives. You know, Charles Murray is one of the leading conservative thinkers about welfare and other areas. Charles Murray said the problem with the approach to accountability and No Child Left Behind and the reliance on testing is that you end up with teaching to the test. And it undermines what you're talking about, which is how do we get these critical thinking, skilled students. Do you worry that if we kind of latch on to this accountability model of testing, that we're just going to continue the No Child Left Behind teaching to the test?
You wrapped a whole bunch of stuff into that one, Larry. First off, you know, the year 2000 seems like a century ago. You know, especially if you've been running for the governor's office, last week feels like a year ago. I would say two things. Even though I've complimented President Obama and his administration for the school reform ideas that they put in, which, by the way, include testing. I don't believe that it's the federal government's job to run our schools. I think Minnesota's got to run them. So I think what that shows is we're willing to listen to others, take their ideas if they're good, and try to put them to work here in Minnesota. So let's be clear, not a supporter of the federal government telling Minnesota how to run its schools, but I am a supporter of good ideas. When you talk about teaching to the test, again, in my remarks, you heard me make the point that while there are criticisms and there can be controversy, it is the best way we have right now to measure outcomes. You've got to be vigilant. You've got to be aware that you can't just create such a one-dimensional program that it doesn't achieve the results. So that's where the professional educators have to be professionals. But we've got to understand, they're not Democrat, Republican ideas. These are real ideas by real educational professionals that are saying, like it or not, this is the best way to measure outcomes, and we need to start making sure that our kids are achieving the outcomes.
Thank you very much. One last question on the testing part. As you know, there's a lot of discussion at the legislature, but also in our communities, about testing and the focus on testing. There are some who say, well, the tests are, and you've acknowledged this, the tests are imperfect, but the focus on testing the students and evaluating the teachers misses the bigger picture, which is, you know, are the classrooms too large? What about teachers who are in parts of our state where the kids don't have the same background and education, families that are kind of teaching them from the day they're born? How do you think about that more complex set of challenges?
Well, I mean, I thought my remarks referred to it. We have not attacked the achievement gap in any meaningful way. I mean, it is inexcusable for kids of different races in the state of Minnesota to be so far apart in terms of their preparation for success in our schools and the outcomes. That's why you got to talk about not only alternatives, the promise that a virtual academy shows, that technology offers us, charter school options that actually work. But then more importantly, the preparation, making sure that we give our citizens the ability to put their kids into a pre-K program that will actually prepare them to succeed once they get into our K-12 education system. So testing aside, you know, we are not going to have 100% agreement on any of these issues. But I think we can all agree that what we've been doing has not been achieving the results that we anticipated. So now it's time to start looking at doing it a different way. And they are very aggressive, but the things that I outlined for you today, again, have support from both Republicans and Democrats. Frankly, they have support from people out on the street.
Thank you very much. I've got a bunch of questions here from our energetic audience. Let me roll through some of them. How do you feel about extending the school year, particularly K to 12, into what we now consider the summer months?
I think this is an issue for local school boards. I think this is an issue for local school districts. I don't think the state should be mandating anything when it comes to how you're going to set up your calendar in terms of the days, although we've all heard there are some complaints about some of the different workshop days, et cetera, that we put in our school year. Certainly it needs to be addressed, but that's something that our school boards that set up the calendar every year need to address.
Thank you.
I don't think that's that top-down control model, again, that we're talking about.
Thank you very much. Do you see the voucher system as having any role in our education system here in Minnesota?
I never use the term vouchers. I think it has the wrong connotation. I think we should create opportunities for parents because as a parent of 7 kids, each one of our children has a different way that he or she learns. And we should, as parents, we're with them, we should be able to put that child into the situation that best fits his or her educational needs. And whatever the state can do to make those choices real, I think we should be doing.
Thank you very much. You talk in some of your speeches, at least, about pre-K education. Do you want to say anything about that? That seems like an important part of your vision about opportunity.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. Again, as a parent who's had kids at virtually every level at one time or another, you get to see it from all different aspects and you get to see different challenges. We're very fortunate. There's no question. Our kids are in the Delano School District, which has been very successful. But as I was in the legislature, and you see this sad reality that when a parent puts a child into a classroom, you know, I'll do it this way. I hear from some of my friends in the legislature that see some of these things from a different perspective. They talk about how parents don't engage. You know, they don't get involved in their children's education the way they should. The more that I've watched this happen, the more that I've become aware of the challenges in our school districts, not just our own. And when you look at the achievement gap and what we've done to try and attack it, I believe this. A parent wants one thing for his or her child. They want their child to have the opportunity for a better life than that parent has had. When a parent puts their child into a classroom where that child and that parent know either directly or indirectly they are not destined for success, you get exactly what you put into it. In this case, we've got to look at different ways of creating success. And I often tell the story about a New Horizon Academy example where New Horizon opened up one of its academies on Rice Street in St. Paul. They did it in working with local businesses because businesses understand, as I talked about, that in order for us to be successful, you got to be training your workforce so that you have the most skilled, most dedicated, hardest working people to take the jobs that you offer. Well, this New Horizon Academy, as the story was told to me by the Dunkleys who run New Horizon, they opened on Rice Street, and typically it takes about 3 years for an academy to fill. On Rice Street, it filled within 6 months, and there was a waiting list. They had created the opportunity for scholarships and the like, and I think what that shows us is this, that when a parent is given a real opportunity to put his or her child into an environment that will give them that opportunity to achieve success and be prepared for a better life, they'll take it. So I think it's very important that we start looking. We've got all kinds of money out there right now that goes in different places for so-called pre-K environments. We need to make sure that they're more than just babysitters, that they're focused on literacy and preparing kids to enter into K-12 education and experience success. The other thing I think it does, if we have a focus and a plan, is it engages those parents at the earliest date. And when they see their child having success, they will only want more success best for that child, and hopefully that means they'll be more involved.
So it sounds like Governor Emmer will be an enthusiastic supporter of pre-K education reform.
I'm all about kids, Larry.
Thank you. We've got a number of questions here, and I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear this, about the universities here in Minnesota. And several of the questions get to the issue of your support for higher education, for the rocket science, preparing the workforce, and yet the reality that the support, financial support coming from the legislature has been declining rather rapidly in real terms, not just projected spending, but in real terms it's been falling backwards. So first question is, do you have a plan to stop that erosion, or do you think kind of further cutbacks in state spending on the University of Minnesota is just part of the future?
I think the University of Minnesota, and you as one of its leaders and others that are running the university, absolutely have challenges ahead of them, similar to what government, state government and federal government have. You have to look at how the University of Minnesota exists today and how you're going to deliver the highest quality education to the next generation of students at the most affordable cost. That being said, yes, I do have a plan. And by the way, I put out a budget yesterday with absolute budget targets, and anybody who's looking at it, please take a close look. I did have $400 million less in higher education, and is that because I don't support it? Absolutely not. It's because out of the candidates running for this office, I'm going to be honest with you where I think the target should be. The long term, the solution for the long term is creating jobs once again in our private economy, because if you want to support great institutions like the University of Minnesota and our MnSCU system, if you want to provide the opportunities that we all want to provide for our kids in the future, you got to have not only a vibrant private economy, but a growing private economy. If people will just remember back when Minnesota was really moving its economic engine, it was IBM, 3M, Honeywell, Univac, Unisys, etc. And yes, we still have more Fortune 500 companies headquartered in Minnesota than any other state in the union. But they're not expanding here necessarily. They're not growing their jobs here. When you see a 3M corporation committed to investing up to $2 billion, I think it was, in growth over the next year, and they're doing it everywhere but Minnesota, that's what needs to change if we want to grow the revenues that actually will pay for these things that we all believe in, one of which is this, and I'll just leave it at this, a little shot that I hope people will look at with the other two candidates running for this office. I have put all the numbers out there. Based on the plans that they've put out, the numbers don't add up, and they are going to have to put deeper cuts into higher education or other things that they're not talking about in order to make those plans work. At least we're putting them out there so you see where we're at today, and the idea is for the future. You start driving new economic success in the state of Minnesota, you will be able to pay for things that we need so desperately in our university system.
Okay, so let me see if I can capture part of what I think you're saying, which is, given the economic situation as it exists today in Minnesota, you see the need to cut $400 million from the University of Minnesota. But if the economy gets going again, an Emmer administration would be looking at the possibility of increasing funding for the University of Minnesota, perhaps targeted areas, or is that fair? Or?
Well, it's more than that because you just focused on the university. $400 million was higher education in the state of Minnesota. Yeah. And first off, we're not closed-minded. We set those budget targets. This is more than anybody's ever done, I'm told, who's run for this office during the election, has said, we need to live within our means. Here's the number, and here's what we would do in all these areas. That being said, you also have to work through the legislative process, and you have to work with the higher education institutions. There may be things that we don't know, so there may be adjustments that would be made in those numbers. But the idea is to live within your means. The second part of the issue is, going forward, I see great things for our university system, because in times of challenge like this, and you and I, we were talking about it a little bit before we started today, it causes people, when they don't have money just flowing in, to start to innovate, look at better ways to do things. Greater efficiencies will be realized. Those things are going to happen in the university system and in state government. And yes, in the future, what needs to be supported, you set your priorities, and it should be funded. And if there's a real need and there's evidence that the outcomes are there, then it should be funded.
Thank you. I've got a question here from a student, which is, how would you assist students so they don't graduate from college with $50,000 in debt?
Well, I appreciate that. As a father of 7, I've done the math, all right? You do the math and you realize, I'm going to be working for an awful long time. But then I'm reminded, I paid my own way. I paid my own way through college and did it myself. A lot of you are doing the same thing. And it took me till I was probably in my early 30s to pay off the loans that I did have to take to pay for law school. Now, partly it's your responsibility. I will tell you that right up front. You need to take control of your destiny. You need to be responsible for it. But from our side, I think we also have to talk about tuition programs where when you are accepted into a university, you are guaranteed a certain tuition over the 4 years that you're going to be at that institution. We should be talking about different ways that we can help. The state can create a marketplace that helps you finance these at low interest rates, which we've done in the past. And that's one of the things that I did in college. And I think those are the things we need to talk about, but we need to understand that nothing is free. We all pay for it, and we need to make sure that it's not only affordable, but that it's available to everybody, and more importantly, that when you get out after you have invested all the time and effort and the money that you're talking about, that you have a job that will actually pay off the debt.
Do you see a specific role for the MnSCU system as we move forward? We've got, the University of Minnesota, we've got the MnSCU system. Do you see a specific mission that you're excited about with regard to MnSCU?
I do, but I don't want to go too far with it. I got to tell you, I think the MnSCU system, we're very fortunate in Minnesota to have it. I mean, it's another option that students can use to get education at a very reasonable price in the state of Minnesota, higher education. I see a future, and again, this is also up to leadership in MnSCU. So when I say this, it's not just our way, it's with MnSCU. But we should talk, every one of these institutions offers a complete menu at times of offerings. We should talk about more specialization. We should talk about more partnership arrangements like Fergus Falls has with Moorhead, where you can actually go into Fergus Falls and take courses that are offered through Moorhead. That's the type of future, and the online offerings as well, as I'm doing with some of my own kids right now. We need to have more online offerings through our MnSCU system that serve the population that may not be the traditional college population that can actually sit in a classroom a couple, 3 nights a week.
Thank you. I've got a question here asking you to say a bit more about urban empowerment zones and how you propose to fund them.
Well, actually, the funding, I didn't talk about changing the funding formula. What I talked about was giving some school districts that have some interesting challenges, and this more of a suggestion in terms of a pilot program almost, where when we talk about empowerment zones, we allow those teachers, those education professionals, whether they're in administration or in the classroom, more freedom to actually put resources where they believe they need to go and set up their schools to operate in the most appropriate need for the student population that they're addressing. And the number one thing I told you when we talk about mandates, there are all kinds of state mandates that school districts have to operate within, and they don't have a choice. I'm suggesting we give them the opportunity to say, if we petition, if we get out from underneath this mandate, it's going to allow us the freedom to make certain decisions which will let us put resources in places where we think they're going to be more effective than they are right now. And that was the example with the allowing them to potentially opt out of PELRA, the collective bargaining requirements that we have right now. Give them more freedom to do what they already want to do.
I've got a few more general questions. Read with interest yesterday's column by David Brooks, and I suspect you might agree with him, but I'm curious.
Who's David Brooks?
He's a columnist for the New York Times.
No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
Conservative.
I apologize.
I'd say moderate conservative.
Just having a little fun.
And David Brooks in this piece concludes by saying, Republicans are riding a wave of revulsion about what is happening in Washington, but it is also time to start talking about after the centralizing forces are thwarted. And before that, Brooks says, look, there are millions of voters who, while alarmed by the Democrats' lavish spending, still look to government to play some positive role. Is your discussion today a way to say, hey, look, this is not just about cutting spending and cutting taxes. There is a positive role for government, and that positive role is in empowering innovators, the government playing a role where it can and pulling back where it can't?
You know, I've always, whether people have heard it or not, I've always said that. What I've been running on from day one, and, you know, I love, you know, the talking heads all across this country trying to categorize and identify and tell us what we already know. I've never said no government is the way to go. No, what I've said from day one is we have too much government today. We simply have allowed government to grow to a point where it literally is suffocating our private economy. You have to return some balance to this picture. You have to put government back in the proper proportion to the public that it serves, and you have to create a business environment. And we talk about business, but it's about jobs. We got to create economic opportunity again, private economic opportunity that will grow. It will grow jobs, and jobs in return. If people are getting hired in high quality jobs in the state of Minnesota, they're paying taxes. They're generating, and I hate that when government says generating revenues. No, it's called tax collections. Let's call it what it is. Tax collections are up or tax collections are down based on what? Based on people's economic activity. And the less that you give people to do outside of government, if everybody's going to work inside government, it's ultimately a self-defeating program because it can't support itself eventually. You got to have a growing private economy. In fact, somebody told me yesterday, even Fidel Castro is laying off 500,000 Cubans.
It's unclear if Fidel's still at the
I'm
helm.
sorry, Raul. I was going to say Ramon. Sorry.
But your point here then is that it's about rebalancing the relationship between government, business, and the individual.
Right. I mean, it's about empowering people again. And there's also a cultural change that needs to happen, I believe. You know, somewhere along the way, government was created to serve us. It is a necessary entity in that it's supposed to provide certain services that people don't typically provide. It's supposed to provide transportation. Our Constitution says it's supposed to provide a system of public education because it's so important to have the next generation prepared and so on and so on. It's supposed to provide public safety. Right? These are things, core functions of government that we've known from the beginning. Government provides those things. So guess what? You got to have a growing private economy to pay for those things.
Got it. We're talking about government. We're talking about the balance of government. But how about different levels of government? And I'm specifically interested in some of the ideas that have been kicking around the country that we need to change the Constitution to require the approval of the governor and 2/3 the House and the Senate at the state level for federal legislation to be effective. Is that the right way to, I mean, is the federal and state relationship in terms of the government need to be re-examined? And do we need a new constitutional framework for that?
Yeah, I don't think so. I've been, actually, I signed on to a bill that a representative in Minnesota offered with this 2/3 thing to support him in having the discussion. I've also offered my own bill. Why? Because I do think we need to have the discussion again. I think great people have, whether they're Democrats, Republicans, that doesn't matter anymore. But over the years in Minnesota, and I believe all across the country, but I know Minnesota, what's happened is we had a system that was supposed to have the states, remember Louis Brandeis, I think, these are all their own laboratories in democracy. Well, what happened is, I think over time, states, whether it's the governor and the legislature or both, over time started waiting anxiously for the next one-size-fits-all answer to come from Washington. And it kept coming from Congress with these dollars attached to it and then other strings that said, oh, and by the way, if you want this, you also have to commit to this. The discussion that needs to be had, I believe, and that's the purpose, at least my purpose for those types of proposals, is to get this discussion going. I don't believe you got to redo our Constitution and all the rest. I think we got to talk about the fact that every time a federal program is offered to the state of Minnesota, It is up to the next governor and future legislatures to always do the due diligence that is required for the public. What does that mean? It's just like a business. You should be looking at this program that's offered and say to yourself, all right, now, if we say yes to this, what does it commit Minnesota to in the future? Are we suddenly opting into future financial liabilities that we may not be able to pay, or more importantly, that our children are going to be asked to pay?
Thank you very much. We're almost out of time. Let me ask you one last question, which is about how you envision your style of leadership. We've had a kind of a breakdown between the legislature and the governor and some shutdowns of government here. How would you interact with legislature in which the DFL controls maybe both chambers, but at least one?
You know what, my goal at the end of this, I used to say this to kids that came down, and I'd take them into the well of the House of Representatives, and I'd talk to them about, you hear a lot of stuff out in the public about this person's point of view and that person's point of view. What I told them is, my belief is this, that in its most basic form, Republicans believe that people should be the answer to all problems. In the Democrats' view, government should play a much bigger role in solving all problems. And guess what? Neither is actually right. Somewhere in there is the answer. And I think what we've done a very poor job of, and this is what I would like to show you can change, is we've become, if you don't agree with me, then you must be bad. I want to get back to a place where we can have open, honest, vigorous, aggressive debate, and then at the end of the day, even though we see the world from two different points of view, we can shake hands and say, hey, Larry, how are you kids? How's your family doing? By the way, what are you doing this weekend? Somewhere along the line, we got away from that, and that's the style that I would like to see. No, it's not necessarily about everybody gets what they want. Leadership is not about leading people to where they already are. It's about leading them to where they need to be. And if you're offering to be a leader, you better be willing to stick your chin out there and take a hit and maybe not be successful. But that's part of leading. And at the end of the day, if you're not successful, you still all live in Minnesota. You still all want the same things for our kids and their kids. So that's what I would like to see.
Representative Emmer, thank you for an energetic, ambitious agenda you've laid out in education. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Lynn.